or verse 2 of the book of Esther. So Mordechai was doing his civil disobedience, and he came to Adlifnei Shara Melech. He came to the gate of the king. So you're not allowed to come there wearing your sackcloth. So you could read this verse two ways. You could read it, he came up until the front of the gate because he couldn't go any farther, because if you're going farther, it'd be breaking the law. Or you could read it that he came to exactly the place where you weren't allowed to go wearing your sackcloth because he was breaking the law. And he was doing a civil disobedience. This was an act of civil disobedience on Mordechai's part. He was intentionally wearing the sackcloth in a place he wasn't allowed to, because he was so upset about the outrageous law made by the king. In every country or every province, the place where the word of the king and his laws would reach, there was tremendous mourning for the Jews, fasting and crying and eulogizing. Sackcloth and ashes were spread out for the rabbim. So Rashi just tells us any place where the messengers brought the scrolls, so they were crying. Vatavona naros Esther. So Esther seems to be totally, at best unaware, at worst ignoring this. So her maidens and her servants came. They told her what Mordechai was doing. And the queen was very upset. The queen was very upset. So she sent clothing to dress Mordechai, to remove his sackcloth, and he didn't accept it. Why was she upset? She wasn't upset about the decree. She was upset that Mordechai was endangering her position. That's what she was upset about. So she says to Mordechai, now there's two ways to read this. You could read it that she sends him clothing to say, you're embarrassing me, put on clothing. That's the way you could read it. That's the way I think we should read it. Or the other way to read it, one time I was with Rabbi Weiss, and he was giving this shiur in the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, and in the audience was Jack Lew. So this was before Jack Lew was the Secretary of State and the Chief of Staff. So this was like, we're talking 25, 30 years ago. And he said, no. When Rabbi Weiss made this suggestion, Jack said, no. This means she was saying, come inside. She's sending him clothing so that he could come inside and be an inside Jew. You don't have to be outside. You can affect change from the inside. That's what he was saying. That's how Jack read it, this verse. Hope I'm doing justice to it. Matikra Esther Lasach. And Esther called to Asach, Misarisei Melech. Now he was one of the advisors to the king. Asher Amilu Fanea, that had been established before her. Matitzavei Mordechai, Adat Mazev Amazeh. And she commands him about Mordechai to know what's going on. She says, go out to Mordechai. What's going on is not acceptable. So,
Rabbi, last year you introduced us to a book about Esther. I don't remember what it's called. Finding something in the book of Esther. What is his opinion about what Rabbi Weiss said?
I don't remember the book, so I definitely don't remember his opinion.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I don't remember anything anymore. That's why I do. That's the best part about studying. It's all fresh for me. It's all fresh. Every year I do it the same. It's beautiful. It's all new. And then I think, wow, I never thought of this before. Vayetzei Hasach al Mordechai al Rechov Ha'ir. So now Hasach goes out to Mordechai to the Rechov Ha'ir. So Mordechai is making a big tumult. He's out there in the streets. Esther is getting upset. And Mordechai's still in the streets. Asher Lefnei Sha'ar HaMelech. Mordechai is out there on the streets in front of the gate to the king. Vayaged lo Mordechai et kol asher kara'u. And Mordechai told him everything that had happened. Vet parashat hakesef asher amar Haman lishkol al ginzei hamelech b'Yehudim labdam. And he also told him, Mordechai had the unbelievable intelligence. He told Hasach, you know, Haman gave Achashverosh a big bribe. He told him about the money. How did Mordechai know? We don't know. Mordechai had intelligence to destroy them. And then there's one more thing. One more incredible piece of intelligence. Ve'et patshegen kitav hadat. And then he gave to Hatach patshegen kitav hadat. Patshegen is an unusual word. It's not clear to me what it means, but it means he gave him a copy of the text. Asher nitam b'Shushan. That was given in Shushan, Lashmidam, to destroy them. Natanlo, he gave it to Asach, Laharot Esther, to show it to Esther. Ulagidla, to tell her, he gave her a copy of the text. How did he get that text? It's not like today, you know, something goes out on the internet and everybody has a copy of it. He had a copy of the text. His intelligence had something that Esther didn't have. So it must have been until that point, Esther was hearing rumors. And maybe there were rumors about a decree, but nobody could be certain that there was really a decree. But Mordechai said, I have the text of the decree. And that says that we're going to be destroyed. And says to Esther, you have to go to the king and to make a request from him for his people, for her people. Asach came and told Esther the words of Mordechai. Vatomer Esther la'asach, v'tetzaveo Mordechai. So Esther said to Asach, and she commanded to Mordechai. And here comes Mordechai, our own Mordechai. Good afternoon, Mordechai. So he says, Kol avdei hamelach. She said to Esther says back. Basically, the first step was to say to Mordechai, hello, Aviva, good afternoon. Her first step was to say to Mordechai, you're embarrassing me. Get dressed. Now the next step is to say to Mordechai, my hands are tied. There's nothing I could do. I promise you, I've gotten both of these responses in my limited role as an activist. I got both of these responses. Hello, Elon, come in and have a seat next to us. We're studying about Mordechai and Esther. What page are we on, Dan?
1378.
1378. Oh, Jeff, 1378. So all the servants of the king and the people of the king, she said, Yodim asher kol ish v'isha asher yavo hamelech al chatzer hapnimis asher lo yikareh achas dato amis levad mi asher yoshilu hamelech et shavita zaya v'chaya v'ani lo nikresi lavo hamelech zeh shel Shimyon. She said, all the servants of the king and all the people of the province, they know that any man or woman who just shows up at the inner courtyard of the king and we're not called then the law is that he's supposed to die, except if the king will stick out his scepter, a golden scepter, and then they'll live. And I have not been called to come to the king for 30 days. So she says, basically, is the only way I could do this is I'm going to die, so I can't do it. I have no recourse here. I can't help you. You could also read this, of course, on a much deeper level as a reference to God, that all the servants of the king can only come to the inner courtyard, the Holy of Holies. And that's where the golden scepter of God is. And that's in the Holy of Holies, only the Kohen Gadol, and nobody else can just walk in there. And she's saying, I can't go, I'm afraid. So now we have arguably the most powerful part of the book of Esther. Ve'agidu Mordechai es divrei Esther. And they told Mordechai the words of Esther. And Mordechai responds, Vayomer Mordechai lashiv el Esther. Mordechai says to Esther, Al tadami b'nafshech nimalei beit hamelech mikol hayudim. Do not think to yourself that you will survive from all of the Jews. Don't think it'll be different for you. Rashi says, Al techashvi, don't think. That's what Al tadami means. Don't think that you'll be different. Think about all the Jews in Nazi Germany who tried to hide their identity. Didn't work. Some people have tried to hide their Jewish identity over the years. Yes, Madeleine Albright. I don't believe for a second she didn't know she was Jewish. Do you, Jeff?
I believe that she didn't want to know.
Okay. I believe that it was, if she really didn't know, it was through, like,
Well, it was part of her family. Her family, her father was, a big diplomat, and they were part of that group of people that let events take their course and didn't inquire very deeply.
Well, there
Unless
was-
you look, find out.
what was the, right, soon after Madeleine Albright, there was a guy who was a senator from Virginia. I forgot his name. Maybe somebody will remember his name. And his mother told him she was Jewish. They were Jewish. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Was it Allen or something?
George Allen.
George Allen, yeah. And what she said to him as she lay there sick, she said, I want you to know I'm Jewish. Do you still love me?
Well, they felt that way. Those
And
it was better not to. I had that occasion with a very well-known guy in Poland, and his great uncle was Jewish,
and they kept it a secret.
and but he never wanted to explore
Right.
his roots, and it's a long story. But he actually spent days researching my family's roots. Oh, really?
Well, the thing is, I knew somebody who went to high school with George Allen, and they said he was the most goyish guy ever. This guy was shocked that he was Jewish. He's like, they used to roast pigs for supper every night. Yeah, he was shocked beyond words at this, beyond belief. So it is possible that, I would say this, even though I don't have a lot of sympathy for Madeleine Albright or George Allen, but I do think it's possible that this desire to look up your past and to see where you came from is more prevalent amongst Jews, that our attachment to our past, because we're so isolated, than amongst the non-Jews.
And sometimes,
Yeah, so with George Allen, he found out in the summer of 2006 that his grandfather was Jewish.
His mother,
His mother hid this all these years.
right.
yeah, that was the appropriate thing to do for those people, because it's a burden that doesn't help them.
You bring the
They don't
chumash.
know. They don't have to lie about it.
I mean, whatever.
It's a whole subculture which
Yeah,
we're not used
some.
Ah.
to. So you're very proud of your heritage. A
Yeah.
lot of people just don't want to know because politically and career-wise.
Well, they think they can run away from their Judaism. So Mordechai says to Esther, don't think that you alone will survive. And then he says something else. He says, okay, Eitan, we're chapter 4, verse 13 of Esther. Eitan, I hope you did well in Battle of the Grades. Yeah, what page is it on? Tell Eitan. 1380. Battle of the Grades, very important. I hope you did well.
We're doing pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Got another day.
Yeah, okay, there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah.
A lot at stake here.
Really?
Rabbi, I was just going to ask if maybe the word tedami comes from the word dmama, quietness.
So Rashi says it's possible, but Rashi says it comes from the word tichshavi, do not think. Aya kasher dimiti, like you imagine. Al tedami benafshech. Don't think. That's what Rashi says. So it's similar. There's another word similar. It says Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 verses of the Torah, bedema. People, like in there too, we were arguing about what it means. So it's possible you're right, but here's what happens. Vayomer Mordechai. So he says, if you will be silent at this time, the Jews will get salvation from another place. And you and your household will perish. And who knows if it's for this reason that you came to the kingdom? Meaning to say, Rashi says, Miyodea, who knows if the king will want you next year? Meaning to say, maybe you'll be when it's time to die. And so therefore, this time, this is the time for you to act. But I was always thinking like this. First of all, it's an incredibly powerful phrase. And I know a couple of times I've been talking with senators, and this is a big verse for them. This verse, like especially the Christian religious senators, this is a huge verse for them. Who knows if it's for this reason you came to power? I would not be surprised if somebody like the Speaker of the House, he's a very religious man. I'm sure this verse is rolling off his mouth every day. No, seriously. Like whenever you speak with evangelical Christian politicians, this is a very big verse for them. Who knows if it's for this? Like they view themselves as on a spiritual mission. But the verse is a little bit contradictory. If you're trying to get somebody to do something, to risk their life, is it the most effective way to say to them, if you don't do this, we'll get this done another way? Like then they'll say, okay, so you don't need me.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
So what? What?
Yeah, that's the logical way to think. So why did he say this?
Right. So
if somebody else will do it, I'll say,
right,
if you feel guilty, it's not my problem.
Right. So that's what I was wondering about.
Maybe it's like Moshe because he also refused the mission, right? And Hashem told him, "Don't. I know that you are the man." And
I feel like it's reverse psychology.
It's reverse.
We'll make the one.
And there's another thing going on here. That this was a year in advance. This was a year in advance. The decree was for Purim, and this was Pesach. So why is he approaching her now? So many things could happen. Like there could be a nuclear war before then. Like why does he have to do it right away? So I don't know. It's always bothered me, that approach. But I will say many times I sat there with Rabbi Weiss in activist meetings, and he really stared down the politicians and told them, you better do this, and if you don't do it, we'll do it another way. This is your moment to achieve greatness. So that's what he's saying to Esther. This is your moment to achieve greatness. So now let's remind ourselves, when is this whole encounter taking place in the rabbinic tradition? This is taking place on Pesach, the first night of the Seder. Matomer Esther, and this is around Esther. At this point, has been in power, been the queen for 9 years. She's kept her head below the ground. She survived. She's kept it below the parapet. That's how she's been able to survive. Matomer Esther Hashiva Mordechai. So Esther says, go back to and respond to Mordechai. Interestingly, before it says she had Hasach. Here it seems like she's speaking directly, even though she said, get this word back to Mordechai. ותשומו אליי, ואל תלכו ואל תשתו 3 ימים לילה ויום, גם אני ונערסי עצום כן, ובכן יבוא המלך אשר לא כדס, כאשר עבדתי. So she says, go gather all the Jews that are found in Shushan and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, day and night. and also I and my maidens will fast, and then I will come to the king, not in accordance with the law. And like if I perish, I perish. So first of all, we want to remind everybody that this is not the source for the fast of Esther, because this is on Pesach, and the fast of Esther is the Eve of Purim. So the fast of Esther is a different source, not in the Bible, and also not in the Talmud. And everybody should be aware it's not in the Talmud.
So what is the source?
The source is, first of all, the first time it's mentioned is in post-Talmudic texts, but the source is most likely that some say when you go out into battle, they fasted because they fought on that day. But also it's to remind ourselves that when we go into celebration, we fast on the eve to put ourselves in the right framework. What does it mean when she says, I will come to the king not in accordance with the law? What does that mean?
You have to be called by the king.
So that's the first explanation of Rashi. She'ein dat l'kanes asher lo yikared, because she wasn't summoned. But the Gemara Megillah gives us a second explanation. The Gemara Megillah says, asher lo kadas she'ad ata ba'ones v'achshav b'ratzon. Up until now, she was forced to be with Achashverosh. Remember that, excuse me. Remember that according to the rabbis, Esther and Mordechai were married. So now she's saying, up until now, I was forced. So if a man, Rahman al-San, forces a woman, she's allowed to return to her husband. But if a woman on her own goes and embraces another man, then she's not allowed to return to her husband. So she's saying, now, once I do this and I go to the king, I'm never going to be allowed to return to my husband. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, we did this recently, asked the question, how is Esther allowed to be with Achashverosh? You have to give up your life rather than commit adultery. So how was she able? Yes, Eitan, remember this? We did this together?
Might have done this last show, so it's Esther Cargo.
So that's one answer of the Gemara, which is that Esther was passive. That Eitan is saying she was like the ground. She was passive in her encounter with Achashverosh, which is one explanation.
It's also like he was like with a non-Jew, it's like a horse, so it wasn't really.
Another answer, Eitan, is so sharp that the seed of the non-Jew is not considered like it's really adultery. That was the second answer of the Talmud, and the Talmud gave a third answer, that it was to save the masses. To save the masses is a different law. She's really about to save the masses. This is a very touchy subject, as you can imagine, and Israeli intelligence seems to have used this type of honey trap in its existential war for survival. Question is it appropriate? So she says, "V'kasher avadati avadati." What does that mean? She says, "Kasher etchalti leilech la'avod elech v'amus." Just like I began to perish, I will go and I will die. And then the Midrash states, just like I can no longer return to my father's house, I will no longer be able to go back to you, because she had been married to Mordechai. Because now I'm willingly going. And so she says, I'm no longer able to return to you. So that's the chapter. Excuse me, no, one more verse. Mordechai. So right away we see that the dynamic has changed. Two major ways. Mordechai went and did everything that Esther had commanded. So first of all, the dynamic has changed in that Mordechai is now listening to Esther. Esther has developed as a leader. And number two, the dynamic has changed in that right away, for the first time, we see religion enter into the text. We see Esther and Mordechai do an overtly religious act, which they had never done before. And it's not insignificant. Rashi here tells us, Al dat litanot biyom tov rishon shel Pesach. Mordechai violates the faith and he fasts on the first day of Pesach. You're not supposed to fast on the first day of Pesach. Because he fasted on the 14th of Nisan, the 15th, and the 16th. Because on the 13th day, the scrolls went out. So they fasted on Erev Pesach, Pesach, and the second day of Pesach. So that's when nobody had a Seder that year. Nobody ate matzah that year. Nobody was eating the matzah. Speaking of matzah, we have matzah for everybody coming. I baked matzah in Israel, and I'm going to give everybody here at least 1 pound. Hopefully, I can give you more. At least 1 pound. How many pounds do you need, Elon?
Probably like 1.5 to 2. Rabbi, I feel like if you could spare some.
We'll
Rabbi,
see.
I was just thinking that maybe
Yes, Rabbi Yosef is talking.
sorry,
Yes, Rabbi Yosef, go.
that that's the kind of leadership that we need today, because like on October 7th was Simchas Torah. If we had knowledge of what was going on, the rabbis could have declared that, that we're not dancing anymore, or something similar. Don't know, just
I mean, overriding the Pesach holiday.
the Simchas Torah holiday. I'm saying just like Mordechai overrode the holiday of Passover on October 7th last year, a year and a half ago.
You know what? It's a very significant point that Mordechai said to Esther, according to the Midrash, how can we fast? It's Pesach. And she said, if there's no Passover, if there's no Israel, then what's the point of Passover? It reminds me of a prayer that the Jews of Bergen-Belsen said before eating bread on Pesach. Did anybody ever remember that? They said, we know that it's a mitzvah to eat matzah, but we don't have any matzah, and if we don't eat bread, we're going to die. So we're going to eat this bread and look upon it as though we're keeping your laws of eating matzah. Yes, Akiva, and then we'll daven.
We don't hold like this, but I saw a Gemara once that there was an opinion that the Rabbanim could even make people do something that's against the Torah. But we don't hold like that.
The Gemara tells us in Horios that greater is a sin done for the right reasons than a mitzvah done for the wrong reasons. All right, let's stop here. I'm going to stop in Mincha.